All right, welcome to season 2 of Education in Color. For our first guest, we have Jonathan Quash, the Executive Director of BMI. Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you so much. I am Jonathan Quash, the Executive Director of the CUNY Black Male Initiative Program. Prior to this position, I was the Director for the York College Male Initiative Program for 17 years. So in the BMI program in total, it's been since the beginning, for 18 years now.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now we're just going to dive right in, and I want to open up with our first question, which was, what was your educational experience like growing up, and what was your relationship with education and school in general?
Well, I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, and so my educational experience has been pretty much programming, or schools, I should say, out of Queens. I grew up near Rochdale Village, or in Rochdale Village, and then I went to Thomas Edison High School. Ultimately, I went to York College as a bachelor's in my bachelor's program, and then went on to other programs for my master's and my PhD. But for the most part, Queens has been my home for education, and my experience has been, and my relationship essentially has been pretty good. Even though in the beginning, I was not really clear on what it is I wanted to do as far as my career, because my father was an accountant, and he really wanted me to go into business and follow his footsteps. But I was more into music, and I wanted to follow the footsteps of Prince. So we didn't agree. But nonetheless, I kind of found a happy medium and decided to have a career in education, which allowed me to teach, and then also allowed me to work in student affairs, which I am now, and that I really enjoy, I think, the work that I'm doing now, because it does give me the opportunity to be very, very creative and use a variety of mediums to be able to help students out.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned creativity, so I had another question lined up. I was like, all right, I'm gonna ask this, but then once you said that, I'm like, all right, let's dive into that. So you said it allows you to be a little bit more creative being in this space, and I want to ask you, I guess, what has been the extent of the creativity you've been allowed?
Well, what it has done, even like sort of like with the pandemic, is that I have been at the time when I was director of special programs at York College, I had to sort of find those things that were forcing students to not return to school. I would either have to find out if a student had financial trouble, or if they had food insecurity problem or housing insecurity problems, or there was something in their household as it relates to their family, that they would no longer be able to go to school. So my role really was to try to get in there and solve that problem. So forcing myself to become creative in the sense that there's no playbook that says, if a student has this problem, this is what you do. You have to kind of go with the flow and find a solution to a problem that maybe no one else has encountered. I used to have students who, for instance, would find apartments to live on Craigslist, and then they realized that they were scams, and then they got all their money. The money was gone. There was no apartment, and then they would be forced to go to work and try to find a place to live quickly to save up again, or me be creative enough to find a way to help them out. So that kind of a thing forces you to be creative, and forces you to really look at the needs of a student, and not no two students, I would say, have the same need, but it forces you to kind of look at how a student in an urban environment like New York City, what challenges they have, and how we are to really, as educators, try to be creative in finding ways to support them so that they can still get their education, because they have tuition they've paid, or some government has paid, and they have goals that they want to meet as far as careers. And so I think we owe it to them to kind of make sure that happens.
Thank you for that. And the creativity is definitely useful, because I don't know if you guys see in the background a whole bunch of big buildings, but I'm pretty sure it's like $3,000 for like a shoebox on like Times Square or something. Well, actually, Times Square is like prime real estate. It's like $6K for a shoebox. But the next question I want to ask you is, have you ever had a male teacher of color growing up? And if so, which teacher stood out to you the most, and why?
Yeah, there have been a few. I can tell you there are two that stick out to my mind. One was in Jamaica, Queens, there is my junior high school, which is still there. At the time, it was called Junior High School 72, but now it is called Catherine and Count Basie Junior High School. And the assistant principal or vice principal, his name is Joseph Thayard. He was a music director in his previous life, and he put together a volunteer chorus at the beginning of the day before classes started, like 8 in the morning. And he gathered some students that he felt would be a part of it. And he became my mentor. I was with that group for like 3 years. We performed here and there. We weren't an official chorus, but he wanted to keep students engaged in the school. And so I thought he was outstanding. Another gentleman that I honestly didn't really care for so much, but he left an impression on me. Yeah. His name was Mr. Henley. He was my English teacher in elementary school, which was PS 80. The reason why Mr. Henley was, I think, not so much my favorite, but he stood out to me is because at the time, I didn't really understand his tactics of teaching and classroom management. He was one of those teachers that used to make us line up outside of the class before coming in. We couldn't talk. We had to look a certain way. It was a public school, but we couldn't keep our heads down, when we lined up. So I remember one incident where a student had a sweatshirt wrapped around his neck because he had come from lunch or gym or something, and Mr. Henley, he stood there outside in the hallway while we lined up, and he looked at us and he said, he told the student, his name I forgot, but he told the student, he says, "Why are you dressed like that? What give me that sweatshirt." So he took it off and gave it to Mr. Henley, and Mr. Henley threw it back at him and said, "Now wear it the right way." And then he put it on. So I didn't, at the time I'm like, well, why would he do that to the kid? Embarrassing him and everything. But he left a lasting impression upon that young man, and this young man no longer came to class dressed that way. He, from that day forward, really understood that his appearance was important to at least him, and obviously to others. So while I didn't necessarily appreciate or understand it back then, that's a lesson in hard love or tough love, I think, in that Mr. Henley was really trying to, and this is a young black kid who had his pants out, his shirt out of his pants, and this sweatshirt around his neck. So obviously not dressed for English class, but he wanted him to kind of like not use that as an excuse, and then got him back, I think, on the right track. And he turned out to be a great young man. I do remember being friends with that kid. And after that incident, though, things changed. So I think for me, those two, Mr. Thayer and Mr. Henley, are really great examples of my educational experience with black males.
It's funny when you mentioned Mr. Henley, like, this guy left an impression on me, but I don't really like him. I was like, way to be the lead over there. Yeah. But it's funny you mentioned Mr. Henley, because I feel like I was a similar way with my students, and if they're watching this, don't just click off. But I feel like the tough love aspect is sometimes needed with students, especially students that are a little bit younger. Yeah. So like my first class was 7th graders, and for 7th graders coming straight out of the pandemic, it was a little hard for them, I guess. Like they didn't really know about the societal norms that they missed out on, because they missed out on, I think, 5th grade and 6th grade. Yeah. So they missed out on the transitionary period from elementary to middle school. Right. So then at that point, there were certain things that I had to tell them, like, all right, you're not going to just go and just smack a kid upside the head just because you feel like it, or you're not just going to, while we're all walking, do a TikTok dance in the middle of in the stairs and then have everyone trip over each other. But I feel like sometimes kids resonate with that well, and sometimes they appreciate it, but other times they're just going to be like, I hate you. Don't talk to me.
Yeah. I think that has a lot to do with the kind of discipline they get at home, whether they're used to that or whether they find it offensive.
Right. Yeah, because I feel like every different child, like for me personally, my parents never beat me, but they do funny things where it's just like, I misbehave. Okay, put my hands on my ears right. and then squat. Do like 50 squats. My legs were burning. Wow. But that taught me, okay, let me not do this again because I'm going to have to go through a rigorous like workout like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and so moving to the next question, I want to ask you, how did you start your professional career in education, and what moment made you realize that this was the work that was meant for you?
Well, when I graduated from college, I forget what year it was. Anyway, when I graduated from college some time ago, last year, I wanted to essentially, I started a career in sales. I worked for Bloomingdale's because I had been while in college, I was in sales. I worked for A&S, a store called A&S, and Macy's, and then ultimately went to Bloomingdale's. So when I graduated college, I was still at Bloomingdale's. I just went to full time, and I began making significant amount of money as a salesperson, and I really enjoyed it. I thought anyway, and so, but little by little, I realized it's sort of though it's an honorable profession, it's kind of limited to me in terms of what I wanted to do by helping other people. So I'd help them with sales, help them buy clothes or help them buy furniture, help them buy whatever it is that they were buying. But the reality is there was more in me that wanted to kind of give back. And so I began to look at the possibility of going back to school, like getting my master's degree. And so, and my colleagues, my colleagues at Bloomingdale's would encourage me to do the same thing. They said, why are you wasting your time here? Clearly you don't belong here. Da, 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 da. Not because I was bad, but because I would often talk about other things. And so that's ultimately what I did. I made the hard choice of going back to get my master's degree, and that's when my career in education began. I fell in love with, because I really wanted to teach. Right. I wanted to teach music, but I fell in love with the idea of higher education's student affairs. And so I began studying up on what student affairs is, because in the classroom, you can do a lot. But you only have 28 to 35 people you can do a lot with. In student affairs, we can do with many more. And so I was trying to be able to touch more than those 28 lives. Well, I still do, but a lot of times, 28 out of 8,000, it's not a big difference. But if you touch many more, then those people can help tell others about the programming and the support and stuff. So I studied higher education student affairs and the history of it and the origins and the organizational theories and stuff. And then I fell in love with it. I honestly really love student affairs programming in education, though I still teach. I wouldn't trade it, and I encourage people to find out more about educational careers and how to help students. Only because I guess that's just my nature of helping people. But I feel as if that is something I kind of fell into simply because I was doing something which I enjoyed. I made a lot of money at, but it was the job, not a career. So
I see what you mean.
When I wanted to change.
And the passion probably has a lot to do with it too, because like you were saying, your coworker's like, I don't know why you're here. You should just do something else, because you were talking a lot about something else. And I feel like that is always like that crossroads we're at. Do we do something that we're good at, or do we do something that we're passionate about? And once you find the crossroads of, okay, I'm good at this and passionate about this, well, there's never really going to be like work. One of my friends, he's a drummer. He always says that I don't think he created this expression, but in his signature, he always says, "Do what you love," and that is very important, because while I was doing something that I love to sell. Like, I know you've been eyeing this microphone, but I love to sell, and it's just part of my growing up as a salesman. But more than that, I love to help, and so now I'm doing what I love. Whereas before, I didn't necessarily love what I did, because making people buy an $800 microphone, which I'm going to put on sale for you after this. I mean, we got some merch we might make. If you want to help us with that, we'll take all the advice, and
kidding.
Of course the merch is just going to go. It's like a nonprofit fund.
Exactly. Well, this is the best place to do it. And today only you can save 30%. Just kidding.
You know what? Now I feel like we can get a couple TV spots, and we're going to break the fourth wall. If there's any TV, what was it? As Seen on TV. That's
As Seen on TV.
If you guys want to sponsor us, feel free. We're always happy to work with you guys.
Exactly.
But with that, I want to ask you, because you were talking about you fell in love with higher education, programming, student affairs, etc. What was your first point of contact when it came to, I guess, the world of higher education, student affairs, all that type of stuff?
Actually, so my first position in higher education was not something I actually applied for. I was teaching music. I was teaching like 4 or 5 classes,
Right.
Both in traditional college and in adult continuing education. And because of my teaching and some of my work in music, which is what I was teaching in the community, many people knew who I was and knew me, and my reputation was like, oh, this guy, he's great in the community. He can do this, and he has young people, singing and going to the hospitals to sing, for children's stuff. The president of my college at the time had heard about my impact in working with young people, especially because my classes were primarily from 4th through 8th grade.
Okay.
And so she appointed me the director part-time of the Black Male Initiative program at York at the time.
Oh, okay.
And she said, because of your impact with young people and the work you do, I think you'd be a great fit for this. And I'm like, I don't know anything about that, but she said, well, here's, some people, introduce you to, and I have someone kind of mentor you and guide you, and so and that's what she did, and that was part-time. I was part-time for 4 years until they made the position to full-time. Then I was full-time there for 17 years, and then got to know it better and grew, and then now I'm here and just bringing my experiences from being in the program since the beginning, bringing that to this table. But that was my first touch with student affairs and education in general.
That's like a wonderful tie into the next question, because you gave like the perfect backstory. Like, yeah, it was a job that I didn't apply for, but I just got. It's just like
it's all about the segue,
right? And then now the next question that I had was, what's the mission of BMI?
Well, our mission in general is to really offer supportive programming, or what's called student engagement programming, to students of underrepresented populations. So we do that by way of mentoring, academic support, and a couple other institutional things. But for the most part, we look to engage students who are from underserved populations, underrepresented in higher ed, specifically Black and Latino males, because they still historically have been the minority of students in education. Even the college that I was at, Black and Latino males, out of 8,000 students or 7,000 students, they were still maybe 30% of the college population. And that's a primarily Black school, but it was heavily female. University-wide, nationwide, that's still the case. But anyway, our mission really is to provide that programming. So from the high school portion, so we kind of reach them while they're thinking about college,
right?
And then moving them back to the college graduate portion. So hopefully we can get them enough if they want to go to law school or they want to go to med school, they want to get go to grad school. We also help prepare them for that as well. But we try to support them by putting them in mentoring programs and supporting them academically if they need throughout their entire time.
Okay. And you mentioned the supports that you offer to the participants. I guess I want to dive into that a little bit deeper. What specific supports do you offer, and why do you offer those supports in specific?
Well, some of the most basic, the most universal, are mentoring. We do think that mentoring, and there's lots of theories to prove it, including my research, that shows that mentoring is critical for students of underrepresented populations when they're moving from high school or secondary education into higher education, because there's somewhat of a culture shock. So high schools, as you may know, don't necessarily have the sort of case management load that supports individual mentoring or peer mentoring, or even faculty mentoring, because sometimes you'll have a guidance counselor with 800 students,
right?
And there's just no way, that they're going to be able to deal with all of them individually. So having to go from an institution where they're kind of driven to take a test to pass to get out, and have somewhat autonomy in the sense that they have to study themselves, but everything else is kind of done for them.
Right.
But when they go to college, then there's a different world. They have to choose their classes for the most part. They have to succeed in class for the most part. They have to take care of their financial aid, work on their own, and if their parents are not available to do that. So in a lot of cases, there's a big culture shock. And they're also independent, which is also different than high school where teachers are pushing.
Right.
So the faculty is kind of different in higher ed. They just say, here's the expectation. Now you go meet it, So in a lot of cases, the young men in particular, they need that mentor to say, listen, this is what we need to do. We need to first manage our time. You can't work 40 hours a week and think you're going to take 5 classes, Second, also commit some time every class hour. 3 hours you should have a study. It's not about just passing, because you just pass, you're gonna just fail. So you really want to try to do your best and be the best that you can be. It's not a competition like in high school. You have levels of courses, classes. Like I remember when I was in school, you had like the SP classes and this smart, not like that. The college is not. There's a different world, and a lot of students get lost. Taking that first year chem or bio, and they are drowning. It can be a challenge, and that's not necessarily. It's a systemic issue, but the idea is, well, then how do we fix it? I can't fix high school, right? But I can try to support them when they get to higher ed. So that's sort of coupled with academic support. So meaning if they have those issues with chem or bio or English 100 level, where they're writing these long papers and have to know MLA or APA or whatever style, then those where academic supports come in. Some of the other things that we do are really helping students out as it relates to what we call social emotional programming. So they may be part of a group of students who feel a certain way about a certain issue or a certain topic. So we provide, the campuses provide sessions in which students can talk about those issues. Lately, it could be like I'm going to an event on Monday that deals with Black Lives Matter. I'm speaking very briefly at an event there, but the students are voicing their concerns and opinions about how certain industries as well as networks in general kind of treat still black males and females. It may be on issues relating to gender identity that they have a particular feel on. It may be issues related to gun violence in general. The idea with the social emotional programming is to give them an opportunity to delve into these in an intellectual setting, and to also hear and learn from other people who perhaps have experiences that they don't have. So those are some of the three, I think, the three main key components. Some of the other things we do or to try to support that programming is we do ask for academic, or I should say institutional commitment. So the campuses at City University of New York are 25 campuses. So we have programs at every campus, and we ask the institutions to really commit to this, not to have some independent program that gets no support from the campus, but to have a real buy-in with the program. So those are some of the key things that we are doing. Now we're moving into, when this airs, we'll hopefully have moved into wellness programming, which will include health and physical, or I should say physical and mental health wellness. So while director at the campus in Queens, York College, I realized that food insecurity, housing insecurity, mental health and wellness are issues that need to be taken much more seriously, that students grapple with, that we sometimes don't address. I had as an example, I remember one time a student running to my office saying, Professor Quash, can you help this young lady? I went down, she was sitting in the cafeteria crying, a little Asian girl, short Asian girl. I said, what's wrong? She says, I don't have any money to get home. And I'm also hungry. And she had class, she had another 3 or 4 hours for her next class. She couldn't buy a meal. She couldn't even pay her she had depended upon her family to give her money for her Metro card. They couldn't do it. So those kind of, what do you do? If you're that young student, what do you do? What you just sit there and wish you weren't there. But I think that type of wellness programming helping. So what we did, I got her some food through a food voucher for the cafeteria. Got her a Metro card for the month. She didn't have to pay any more for that month. But those kinds of things, is small fixes, but would keep her from dropping out or not going to class, which would affect her academically. So those are the kind of things we're going to add to our programming.
And it's there's two things I want to focus on in specific, where you mentioned the social emotional aspect, but then also the health and wellness. So I feel like those tie in very well together. And I'll start with the first part, the social emotional. I feel like after the pandemic, what ended up happening is there was much more isolation going on. Like even for me nowadays, like I'm in my 20s, and even when I go out, I'll be like, yo, like it's hard to make friends sometimes, right? Like people don't really talk to each other the way they used to. But I feel like that's the way you get intellectual discourse, because online I feel like there's a nuance to it. Like you have the anonymity. So anonymity makes people say some like real wild stuff sometimes, or just be very like out of touch. So in person though, that type of transference of knowledge is very important, especially when you open up the floor for students and the participants to say, hey, this is what's troubling me. Like for me throughout college, I felt like I was just going through the motions. There would be times where I'd do the work and like force myself to do the work. I didn't want to, but I was like, at this point, it's what I got to do. But now that I'm older, I'm like, well, even though I still had to do it, I still could have unpacked those emotions as to why I felt that way. As the as I got older, I'm like, oh, it's just burnout. I just did too much. I think one semester I took like 17, 18 credits because I was like, oh, it'll be easy. That was not easy, man. I was over here, so I'm hungry. I'm here till like 10 p.m. sometimes. But then the second part you're talking about, where it came to like the wellness and the story with the young lady, it reminds me of the time of when I was teaching in the Bronx for like a summer program. I learned about a theory recently that my mentor told me about, and it was food deserts. So when I went to the Bronx to this school, right, and after I learned about this theory, I was taking that summer class at the same time. So I was learning that theory basically as I'm now teaching in the Bronx, and I lived in Queens at the time. And so when I would go through Manhattan and then I'd go be in the Bronx and be at home in Queens, I'd be like, these are such different like neighborhoods. Like when I went and taught in the Bronx, fried chicken store, there was McDonald's, there was just a plethora of like unhealthy options. I did not see one spot that was selling like just salad or lettuce or greens or anything. You go in the city, there's like a ton of spots that do that. And then even by me in Queens, there's a little bit more variety. But then when you break that down and you realize that sometimes students come into the building cranky, sleepy, irritable, it's because they probably didn't even have like a proper meal the night before, or maybe proper sleep. And one thing I learned in the pandemic too was some of my kids would never have their video cameras on. And at first I'd be real with you, I got a little annoyed. I was like, I don't know why you're not gonna have your camera on. But then afterwards I realized some people don't even have like quiet spaces in their house to have their camera on, or like the mic on or anything. One of my colleagues was telling me one of their students would actually go to the closet just so they could take part in the lesson. So little things like that, right, really do impact the overall big picture, because those little things compound every day. So if you have one little thing happening every day for 365 days straight, over the course of a lifetime, 10 years, 5 years, however many years, it's going to compound into something much bigger than that. Sounds like you want a career in student affairs. No, but that's exactly. We're gonna cut that part. That way they don't cut this series, because they're like, yo, you're already scouting new jobs while you're on the job.
No, I'm kidding. No, but teachers are probably the most impactful in all of these things, because they have their front line. They see them on your point. They see them every day. Student affairs see them if they drop in the office or by email. But yeah, I have had students in my class that have going through some terrible issues, but teachers are the frontline workers on this, meaning that if they are aware, they are the ones who get to identify these problems, and they can see, a student crying, or they can see students who generally are introvert or extroverted suddenly being introverted, or some change in the psychology of students. I had, on your point of a pandemic, I was teaching high school students last year, and during the final exam, one of my students cut his camera off. I'm like, you can't do that. And he messaged me privately. He says, you don't understand. I can't open my camera up. My father's asking me to cook dinner now. and it was just he and his father who lived there. And I said, "Oh my God,"
Right.
he cut it on too. And I said, "You cut it on or fail?" I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry if you're watching. But he cut it on, and he was hiding in a closet because that's where he had his laptop. But then he was also, half the time he was on the stove cooking.
He's like, I gotta prove it to you now,
So he says, I either get beat or I fail the class. So I'll do both. But on your point, it is a real challenge, and I think that programs like BMI, we're not the only one. We're the best. But we're not the only one. But programs like BMI are very crucial to 21st century education. It's not just go to class, study, go home, because society has changed. On your point about online, we didn't have. I'm in my 20s too, and so when we didn't have when we were kids, we didn't have cell phones, didn't have internet. It was go home, do your homework, and then get ready for the next day. That's that, but it's completely changed now because when you go home now, or even while you're in school, it's a whole nother world available to you. Of opportunity, of entanglement, of all kinds of things that completely can compete with the classroom. And so I think that's really where learned educators are important, because they have to understand that it's and programs like ours have to become much more important because of the fact that there are all these competing agendas out there for students. By that I mean that there's students who want to participate in protests. Right. There are students who want to participate in things that are sort of important to them based upon things that they see online, whether good or bad. And those things compete. They don't get to stay home after school and do homework. Right. They're out there in Central Park doing the next best TikTok because they want followers, or whatever. But it's a different world, and so I think that competition really is something we have to take much more seriously.
And to that point with the competition, it's funny you mentioned that, because for me, I always look at it as we're in the attention economy right now. So people are always vying for other people's attentions, and what I've noticed specifically, the attention span is getting shorter.
Right.
And it even happened to me, like after college I graduated during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So then, like, during that point, I wasn't really doing too much reading.
Yeah.
So then when I started getting back into reading, I'm like, why can't I even, like, sit still for a page or two or what have you? But then now when you really look at all the short form media that's out there, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok, etc., everyone's so used to now, all right, sell your point right now within the first X amount of seconds, or you'll lose whatever followers, views, X you can get. And it's funny because even for like this podcast, when I look at the statistics sometimes, for everything that's posted online, it's 30 seconds. That's like the big window of opportunity. If you don't got their attention within that 30 seconds, they're already gone.
And that's you hit a tremendous point that is, I think, hopefully being revealed now. That's what educators have to face. Because you're used to 16, 15-week lessons, not the 30-second spot. And so in a classroom, if you don't capture you've got to redesign education to think to sort of adjust the way that young people think now, which is crazy, but that's really the idea. I'm thankful I teach music. I don't have that issue. I put on a drill rap song and I have the whole class for the rest of it. No, but it's like, it becomes very challenging to then think about how do you teach a certain subject, which traditionally takes 15 to 16 weeks or longer, 20 weeks, and then they can go on Twitter and kind of think that they know everything, just watching a couple of reels, it's an interesting dynamic. And I pray for those who are educators who work in secondary elementary education, because it is a challenge.
And so, like right now, like it's funny, whenever I have like my list of questions, it's always like, all right, this is what I'm going to draw myself back to, because 9 times out of 10, every time I want to guess, I'm on with the guests, we're just chatting about a whole bunch of stuff. I'm like, I really love where we're going. But I want to ask you, how has it been working as the executive director for BMI since you've occupied the role?
It's been great. And as I mentioned before, I have expanded just simply what I was doing at the campus level. I've also am working on expanding what BMI does because of my work in the classroom, because of me seeing the needs of students, because of me seeing the retention effect that the pandemic has had, but also just in terms of 21st century education, just looking at the ways in which that has changed. So I'm trying to help BMI to grow with education, grow, meeting those needs of students. We have a strong social media presence, but that's not how you recruit students. Students could care less about what's on the subway.
Yeah.
Or, the idea is really to meet students at where they're at, to be part of what they're part of, and then to help them understand we can get there. I remember just a few weeks ago, I was on the subway, and this team of drummers got on and started to play drums, and I had a jacket on. I had the name of my program on it, and they were playing, and then the drummer said, "CUNY Black Male Initiative," and so he says, "What do you initiate?" I said, "Black males." He said, so he smiled, and we started talking after he collected his money. We started talking about it, and he was very proud that something like that existed, because he didn't exist when he was younger. I think meeting the needs of the people sometimes, and then going where they're at, is really the way to really get students interested in that. And that's what I think one of the things I really like about it, doing the job that needs to be done to get. I have a lofty goal. We're currently at like 5,000 students. By the time this airs, I wanted to get to 10,000 students, in our program, because we're making our way. But there's so much more. CUNY has 25,000 students. Yeah, a whole lot of them are not Black and Latino males. But I want to change that. I want more and more to come to college. So that's really my goal.
And I don't know, it's crazy because I didn't share these questions with you, but it seems like you're knowing which ones I'm gonna ask next. So maybe we should stop the interview because you're reading my mind at this point. But the next question I wanted to ask you was, what benchmarks do you utilize as a moniker of success for the program?
Yeah, I think it's enrollment in terms of
telepathy.
Yeah, right. It's enrollment in terms of my benchmark would be for us to move toward 10,000, and then also a higher average GPA, which is probably more in the weeds. But the idea is, when I was at York College, the average GPA, or my goal, was 3.5 for my guys in the program. It's a little lower here, university-wide, because the community colleges generally work a little bit lower in terms of GPA, but I'm really trying to push it to 3.0. It's right now 2.8, so I'm really trying to push it to 3.0 and really make that, to show the real difference, to show these things matter and they make a difference, that we can do better. It's just a matter of how we apply the resources we have.
And then can you share an experience that showcases how students have applied what BMI has taught them in real life?
Oh, absolutely. I wish I had that data in front of me, but I have a couple of young, fantastic superstars right next door at John Jay College of Criminal Justice who are part of the program, some young men, some young women, who are what I would call superstars in the program, because these are young people who've come from backgrounds that ordinarily you would not think that they are part of something like this, or could be. They're part of a program called the Rising Scholars Program, Rising Justice Scholars Program, and they came into it. It's a pre-law program, and they came into the program with very much the same kind of background as everyone else, mainly has Hispanic background. And now they've gotten, some of them have received over $1.5 million in terms of scholarship offers. They've been accepted at every private and Ivy League law school in New York and outside of the state. They test higher than most students who receive private support, meaning go to private school, private pre-law school. And these are students who receive the kind of support that we offer, BMI offers, just because of the fact that they're part of the program.
Right.
And so it's that kind of success. We have in Sophie Davis School of Medicine, which is CUNY's only med school, we have 89 Black and Latino males who are ready to go to med school and ready to kick it. And the thing is, there are organizations throughout the country who are saying, in terms of med school, we have a shortage of Black men. And I've got like a plethora of them here ready to, where are you at? Come get them, So I think those kind of opportunities are really what we're hoping to do with BMI and some of the great great things. I mean, there's so many stories, but we have a weekly reader that we send out that kind of highlights our students. But there are a lot. There's a lot of great success stories from every campus, from the Hunters, from the Queens College of the world, from York colleges, from College of Staten Island, BMC. You know, there are all kinds of great stories. It's hard to just pick one, but we do have a lot of students who've gone on to do some amazing things.
And speaking about, you know, the success that you've had thus far with the participants, I want to ask like a two-part question, because speaking about the successes makes me think, well, how was BMI before? So how has it changed since its inception versus how it is today? And then the other question I want to add to that is, what are your goals for the program's future, maybe short-term, near-term?
Sure.
Short-term, same thing. Short-term or long-term?
Yeah. Well, in terms of evolution of the program, it has changed a lot. So remember, as I mentioned earlier, this program is at the support, or exists because of the support of the New York City Council. So when it began, it didn't have a home. It didn't have really any foundation. Right. It was a transient program. The early director of the program, Mr. Elliott Dawes, they really didn't even have much of an office for him. He would have to borrow space, you know, until ultimately the university got them some space at City College, and then they transitioned from City College to here. And so it's evolved a lot. It's evolved from 16 programs, of which I was one of the original, to 30 programs now. So we've doubled in size pretty much. We're hopefully increasing our funding stream soon. But for the most part, it's continued to expand what we do. On the where do we go from here stuff, I'm really looking, as I mentioned, to expand to that 10,000 mark. But more importantly, to expand our programming to include wellness, and to also include, which hopefully by the time this airs will occur, which I haven't talked too much about yet. But for the first time, we're going to include athletics, because what better place to deal with young men who have problems than on teams. Again, as a faculty, I've had young men who are on teams who have to go to practice, who have to go to games, who have to travel to games sometime, and yet still go to class, and sometimes can't. I would get notes every week, please excuse this person from class because they're at a game, or please excuse this athlete, he's an athlete. Well, then how do they do the work? You know, they don't, and that's part of the challenge. You have superstars. I mean, CUNY's not really like Division I, you know, but you have superstars on campuses, but they're not, you know, going to the pros necessarily. So academically, they still have to be strong, right? But in a lot of cases, they're really being pulled. So I'm hoping to include athletics soon, which we'll make an announcement about that in the next few months. But we're hoping to look at all of the students in general that really have issues, and I've always had, as the faculty, I've always had that issue. I've had and I'll tell the story quickly, but I had a young man just last year in my class who was on the basketball team, and I would get a letter each day until ultimately I had to do something called a roster verification, VOE, and I had to say, they asked, has he attended? And I was, absolutely not. He hasn't been here one time. He's been a game every single week. So they had to drop him, and he met up with me. He would email and met up with me after class one night, going to the subway late in Jamaica, Queens. And so I had my knife out. Okay, it's a joke. I'm just putting it.
It's okay. You gotta have it concealed.
But no, I don't carry anything like that. But he met up with me and talked to me and said, listen, I'm so-and-so, you know, we've been exchanging emails, and I just wanted to ask you if there's anything I can do, any course that you know I can take, because if I don't get this class, I'm going to be kicked off the team. So I said, well, you're off the team. I said, it's nothing I could do. It's 4 weeks into the semester. You haven't attended one class. How would you possibly try to make up all that work? And so he said, I understand the team, blah, blah, blah. And so and then we began to talk, and he said, you know, I just need somebody to help me, mentor me, help me manage my time. So that, you know, I said to myself, wow, you know, he's one of hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, as a young man on teams in CUNY. I wonder how many others are having this issue. So I began to think about ways in which we can help athletes as well. But so anyway, I just think that's something we really need to look at. You know, so many the students who try out want to be LeBron, want to be the next great soccer player, and academically they can't cut it, so they've got to go to plan B.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. You want to be able to actually be well-rounded coming out of college.
Right.
Because even for me, sometimes I feel like, you know what, maybe I should have paid a little bit more attention in math. I mean, Pythagorean theorem and all that, I don't think I'm going to have to use it. I don't think they're going to be like, gun to my head, what's the fate of the world? Please solve this right now. I don't know, man, but in general, yeah, it does matter to be a little bit more well-rounded. It's funny because one of my students had an older brother who was really, really into varsity and like JV, and they went to like specialized high school for it. So they were on the team. The thing was, though, during their senior year, typically when they're getting scouted, pandemic hit. So no games, no nothing, and he didn't get scouted. So he had to just go to like, normal college over here. And who knows, maybe he could have gone to something like really great from what my student was telling me. He was like pretty good, but he didn't have that option. And it's kind of like he put all of his eggs into one basket because then he went into college and, like he's doing decent now from I'd assume from before. He's doing decent now, but the transitionary period was very hard for him because he was just focusing straight up on, all right, let me just get better at ball because then I'll get scouted in my senior year. But you never know, like freak accidents are going to happen, like the pandemic, COVID, that might deter you from that.
Injury,
Yeah, the most common was like, shit, I tore my ACL.
Right.
But going on with that, I want to ask two things. What is your proudest accomplishment since you've been here at BMI and the biggest challenges that you've faced thus far?
I think the proudest accomplishment since I've been here in the year and a few months has been, it has been, I'd say, securing some additional funding from the state for the first time. In the 18-year history of the BMI program, we've never received state funding, but I began lobbying our elected officials at the state assembly and senate level, and we are on pace to receive funding for the first time. That's something I've been told is a huge accomplishment. So I just didn't want to take no for an answer. So I was in Albany a lot and lobbying and meeting elected officials a lot. And then the other thing is as far as challenges since I've gotten here, I think dealing with the limitations of the program, and by that I mean we are still we're not an institute on our own, with our own autonomy. So we've got to kind of deal with the challenges of having to acquiesce to a larger division of student affairs. Right. But we're not really part of that because we're a universal program, meaning a university-wide. So our programming is somewhat unique in that sense. We don't have a specific function, like we don't deal with immigrant populations only. We don't deal with veterans only. We don't deal with Seek and CD or some other program alone, but we have a variety of all of that is within BMI. Like we have veterans in our program, we have immigrant populations in our program, we have first year students in our population, we have undocumented students in our population. We have a lot, so it's hard to kind of put a button on who the BMI student is, but ideally it's still to help serve, and so I think that's been a real challenge, like meeting the needs of those people, because you can have an undocumented student as well as a student who's first year, and as well as a student who's in the populations that we serve, as well as a student who's going through food insecurity.
It's kind of like those like Venn diagrams, like compare and contrast.
Right, and so that's been I think a challenge. How do you? Because I just want to do it all, I want to help them all, but pulling back those layers of support can be a challenge. Like, what do you need? I have undocumented students for sure, right? But then, how do you help them with employment, afterwards, right? Because they don't have socials, so they're graduating, right? And so they can't do but certain things, So how do you help? So we guide them to that support, and then hopefully get them on the path to being a citizen. But that's a process,
And it's funny, as you're talking, I was just making notes. I was like, note to self, go to Albany a lot more. I'm just like, more money, more problems.
Well, getting state funding is the key. And New York City Man Teachers Represented, they're up there. But it is a key to support having the governor as well as the other branches of government support the programming. I had to do a lot of selling, like I said, but it's what I love to do. It's what I used to do, and selling the program. Why BMI? Well, why not BMI? So, and not only that, but what BMI means to that particular elected official is really important, because all of the students we have in their districts, and all of the influence that voters have, particularly young people now, because they're much more active than they used to be.
Yeah.
So it's a very important thing, and I think hearing from students, hearing the stories, hearing their successes or their needs is really what has been pushing that needle.
And then with that, because since we're talking about partnerships and what have you, I want to ask you, for the partnerships that BMI currently has, which one do you feel like is the most beneficial towards the program's mission? And then what type of partnerships would you look to explore moving forward?
Currently, I think our strongest partnership is with the My Brother's Keeper program. We have what we call a memorandum of understanding with them, and that really is an idea for us to provide pipeline programming for those students. There's hundreds and hundreds of My Brother's Keeper and My Sister Keeper students throughout New York City, and we partner with them regularly, actually, to try to provide the opportunity for those young men to see our programs. So we have these large events set up. We also do smaller kind of mentoring kind of things. That's probably, I think, our strongest program. And I think I'd like to see programs like New York City Men Teach become a little bit more. We're not really connected, but I'd like to see that sort of relationship, because as you and I were talking before, the BMI program has always had an interest in developing young men of color as teachers, and we still do. It's just that we don't have that programming anymore, and I'd love to do that again. So I'd love to partner with someone that would support that. In the past, it was the Deutsche Bank of America's foundation. I'd love for maybe Citi or Morgan Stanley. Those are actually two of our funders, to kind of like see if they would consider that heavier investments by way of us being able to really move the needle as far as getting young men into the classroom, and that involves a lot. It's not a program to say, here, just be part of us, but that's fine. But we want to be able to really do a deep dive into what those students need to remove all obstacles, cover their tuition and all that stuff. So really do something heavy like that. And then we're working with those organizations in that kind of a thing. We're just going to see if they will step up to the plate.
Thank you for that. And it's funny because when I talk about the potential partnerships, I wasn't like fishing, like, oh yeah, work with us too. I know. But it's kind of like, when you're on a date, you drop the bomb, like, yeah, I want to go out with you. Right. But no, I definitely feel like, a partnership like that would be very beneficial. And if it doesn't happen, we're going to just cut this club. Nah, I'm just messing with you. It's definitely going to happen because the thing that I've realized too is funny because while I was actually at City College and I was working as a college assistant for Walter, who was the program director there, we'd actually go to a lot of BMI sponsored events, and we'd work with them too. And I'd always be like, what is BMI? Let me check it out. Because I'd always get like email blasts from like my program director for like all the time. And especially when it comes to like, making more people male educators, because you guys are just talking about like the Sophie Davis and all these other arenas that you have access to. In reality, those are the arenas that give back the most to the communities when you actually have people from said communities going there. Exactly. Like there's so many times like I've seen stories online where it's just like a patient of color will go in and because of like the doctor they have, they'll be like, oh, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z. I don't think this is going to be the best for me. They'll be like, no, it will. And then there's some complications and God forbid they die or they're disabled from it. Right. So I definitely feel like that's one of the greatest ways to like help the community. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that's 100% accurate. And also people are supportive generally of programs that have been supportive to them. So that's something we're actually also looking to expand the BMI alumni network, which for the first time. So we've graduated over 100,000 students over the past 18 years in terms of our program, but we don't have a connection to them. So this is perfect. So when I advertise this episode, I'm gonna be sure, like in the specification. In the links, make sure you're searching for anyone BMI Black male educator.
Exactly.
And now we're actually like, going towards like the final stretch of the episode. I got 2 questions left for you. So this is the and I hope it's not gonna be like the other times where I'm like 1 more or 2 more, and then it's just like, oh shit, I got like 20 more.
I got answers all day. No.
But the question I want to ask you is, if you could go back in time and do anything different, would you or would you not? And it could be professionally or personally, up to you.
Let's see. I don't think I would change anything. Well, no, there is something I would change that I definitely am not going to talk about that. But that's a whole nother can of worms. But no, I think I would change something, and that is when I was younger, to invest more time into music in terms of my own craft. I am a musician now, but I think I always wanted to be better. I'm okay, but I always wanted to be better. And I think if I had invested more time, probably though my career would be different. I still would have that struggle with my father. Him wanting me to be an accountant and me wanting to be a singer. That still would be there. But I remember my father passed away. But I do remember the first time he kind of accepted my music was that when he was sitting in a restaurant and with a client of his, and one of my songs began to play in the restaurant overhead music, and he took that moment to brag. That's my son. That's my son's song. And I found it ironic, because I changed my major in college so many times because of him, saying, "Oh man," he would say, "How are you going to eat as a singer?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir." Yeah. But ultimately he began to he really became like my manager prior to his passing, but because he really got into it. That'd be one thing that I'd change, I think.
Yeah, and just a quick little tidbit on that. I feel like parents are never gonna be happy no matter what. For me, I felt like, all right, when I went to City College, I was like, I'm gonna be an engineer. I saw the math, I was like, I ain't doing this shit, right? Then I was like, you know what? I want to do law. I took the LSAT, and after that, I'm like, I don't want all this debt. And then eventually I settled on this, and it was funny because then afterwards, now my parents are always like, look, my son has a podcast. Look, and I'm like, well, you wasn't shooting me when I was at the gym. I know, right? But now the final question, right? Yeah. It's not really a question, but summarizing the episode, I want you to feel free to shout out any program stakeholders or anyone that's near and dear to your heart. You can look at that camera right there for your I guess like directed message.
Yes, I want to really, really thank. It's not about me, I'll be honest with you. As far as the CUNY Black Male Leadership Program, it is to every program director that does the good work. I just simply sit in my office and support as much as I can, whatever the needs are. But all those program directors out there, to all 25 campuses and all 30 programs that we have, hats off to you, because you guys are the ones who really do the hard work. I also want to shout out, if anyone from there is watching, another program that I work with called AIM Inc. That is a USA. It's a worldwide organization for which I sit on the board here in the USA, regarding mentoring for students of underrepresented populations. It started out of Australia, helping Aboriginals, but it moved to 21 different countries, and I really value and support the work that they do. And basically to all the students out there who are part of the BMI program, and I hope you're watching this, that all this is really for you, and we hope that you really do take advantage of the resources available for you. But also, more than that, let me know and let us know, our team here at Central Office, if we can do anything to support you or help you. It's just a matter of you asking. That's really all, and then the rest we'll try to take care of. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for that, Jonathan. And now, before we wrap up, if you guys want to get involved with the BMI program, feel free to check the link in our description. We'll also, tag their social handles and anything affiliated with them, so you can reach out to them. And with that being said, I want to wrap up episode 1 of season 2 of Education in Color. Good thing I didn't mess up that time. And with that being said, we'll see you guys next time for episode 2. Take care.